Hey, welcome everyone to this webinar and Facebook Live. I'm Luminara Serdar of Autism Transformed, and today I have as my guest CarlaAtherton. She, I might let you introduce yourself because I'm sort of not prepared. I know you just wrote a book, and I want you to speak about that. But she's an amazing human being and has done a lot for families, and I want you to say what you've done, please.
Well, it's a little complex, so I don't blame you. What I do is like, where do I start? And do I take up half this time to explain it? Okay, so what I do is I coach families. So I'm a health coach and consultant, but that doesn't really explain really very well what I do because our field is so new and I deal in complex chronic illness as well as like the basics of like lifestyle stuff, like sleep, rest, exercise, but even with complex illness, right? Like we have to start there as well. So I do functional medicine, functional testing, but I also do some of the stuff like the mental, emotional, spiritual, like all that stuff that's like a well-rounded look at health, like that holistic view. And so what I do is I help people to uncover what their root causes are for their conditions, whether they come to me for themselves or their children or their whole family, which it actually ends up ultimately being is the whole family. And then we uncover that and then the goal is root cause resolution. So what is it that we're finding that's causing these illnesses in the first place, or this dis-ease, or this, just not feeling great? And then we uncover what that is, and then we find the solution. So I have a huge toolkit of things that I work with, and I help people to plan, because if we don't have a plan, it's like, I know what this is like. It's like, even if you're trying to take magnesium every day or, eat this specific food, like if you don't actually plan for it and how you're going to do it and execute it and just say, okay, this is for 3 months and this is when I'm going to check again and I'm going to check in with my coach, it's not happening. Like even the magnesium, I was like, oh, I forgot to do that last night. And then, so planning is really key, especially when you're trying to unravel like a complex illness. And then, okay, so I'm a mom. I have 3 children. So I have a daughter who's 18, a daughter who's 20, and a son who's 22. And so, and then my delving into this line of work was because of my daughter, my middle daughter, and then my other 2 children as well, and just all these health conditions and illnesses and stuff like that were pretty serious. So my daughter has type 1 diabetes. That was our kind of jump into functional medicine, where I went like, the standard of care isn't really working for me. I need to look elsewhere. And then I got trained. And so I started off in academics, and then in English literature and writing and all that stuff, and course, creation. And then I moved into like more of the health stuff. I also teach other people to do what I do through an academy that I run. So we're doing group programs, we're doing individual coaching, lots of stuff going on. Plus I'm a writer, right? Okay, so did that take too long?
No, that's really awesome. I just feel like parents who are listening can really relate, because time goes really fast, and before you know it, your kid's another year older, and then you haven't implemented that, because you didn't do your plan or you didn't sit down and itemize it out. And then secondly, because many parents on the call, they have kids with even more special needs, and more things to do, and more therapies and more appointments and more everything. And one of the themes in your book is how to create family wholeness and harmony. And so I'm guessing, and people can type into the chat if you're on Zoom, or if you're on Facebook, you can type in what you want the most help with, like where you feel stuck. And we all have our different challenges, right? So yeah, if you could just tell us just briefly about your book, like maybe why you wrote it, and then what people would get out of it, and then we can go into some specifics.
Okay, well, why I wrote it is like the same story everybody tells, because of my family, right? And especially all us parents that are listening here, like this is why we do a lot of the things we do, is that not like necessarily just for our kids, because we want to help them, but we also have this personal growth that happens when we become parents and we start seeking out better ways to do things, or more efficient, or why am I tired, or why is this happening? So I wrote that for this book for parents. And I think that what we're lacking in our current, model of health is really like we're kind of like thinking that this is new normal, right? Like everything that we're seeing happening in chronic illness and all these, like even things like acne, I consider chronic illness because there's an underlying cause and it's like continuing on and it's causing some outward symptom. So I wanted to really share the information that I've gathered and the research and all of my expertise, or not expertise, but experience, I would like to say experience in this field, putting all this together because it took me years and years and years to do it. So what people, I think what is really useful, what been really useful for the people that I want to reach is somewhere, one place to put all that stuff. So first, the support piece, like, which is what you're talking about, right? Like I've been there, right? I've done this. I'm one of those parents. And I think that really there's not a lot of things that parents that I haven't done, like, or gone through. I really feel that it's been an interesting 10 years. And so, that the support piece, the connection piece, you're not alone. And then all the practicalities of having to put things into play that we actually learn. So it's like that bridge between, learning all this functional medicine and all these things like root causes and, oh my goodness, and this is what we need to do to change our diet and for sleep patterns and all this stuff. I teach all of that in the book, as well as to all my clients. But how do we do it? What are the roadblocks that we fall into, right? Like if you've got a child who's a picky eater, right, and will only eat mashed potatoes, you got a challenge, right? So I talk about all those things in the book. And I feel like it's really like it serves the, I guess, the support piece as well as the information, like good information and ancient as well as cutting edge. So I pull all that stuff together in the book because that's what I would have liked to have had 10 years ago, right? It took me that long to gather that. So how do you move forward in a healing plan if you takes you 10 years to research it, So that's what I wanted to do with the book. And I had a really good time writing it, but really long.
Yeah. Well, I think what we see as normal in our society, normal food, normal diet, normal everything is anything but normal. It's really far off from like our grandparents and our great grandparents and like the folk medicine, which had some validity, and like Chinese medicine, which is 5,000 years old, Ayurvedic medicine, 5,000 years old, and it's poo-pooed by science today because there's no science on it. Or, I mean, I'm sure there is some now, but because it worked for thousands of years and the herbs worked for, I don't know, hundreds of years. And so I think what we're doing is really getting back to nature and getting back to how we were instead of having this sort of false society stuff put on us. And that's what we all have to learn or unlearn, or, one way or the other. Yeah.
I have actually a whole section in the book about getting back to nature, because I think that's actually the book has a lot of complex stuff in it, but really like getting back to, because it's like a desktop, like, it reads like a book, but it also has things you can look up. But really the answer is getting back to nature. Like I actually made a meme that my husband, for a quote from my husband, because we're very different. Like my solution is this book, right? Mm-hmm. His solution is have a poop. And what was it? Have a poop and take a rest or something like that. I'm like, that's exactly what people need to do. Mm-hmm. It's like, because we talk about digestion and it's all super complex and we talk about all this sleep-wake cycle, whatever. He's just like, it's that simple. And actually really it is, that's really the answer, is get back to nature, because we have everything so unnatural about what we do and how we live. Bags, boxes, and cans that we're eating out of. I mean, I'm just floored when I hear people say, like, I see them skirt around the organic aisle because it's weird. And I've had people tell me that it's weird. Organics are weird. How is that weird? It's just food without chemicals. It's such an interesting way that we sort of learned, right? And I grew up in the 80s. I mean, talk about bags, boxes, and cans, Kraft dinner, itchy band noodles, like Kool-Aid, all that stuff where it was just like, this was the bomb, right? We could do this and just get away with, having all the rest of the time to just do whatever else we wanted. But we kind of took a turn for, this way, when I would really like to just help people to reel their way back. Mm-hmm. And, transition back into this more natural way of eating, being, moving, all
Well,
that.
yeah, I think the first thing we need to realize is that we are living in this unnatural way. So that's the first thing. And then I
Yeah,
think a lot of it involves a shift in thinking. So I'm hoping in your book you talk about thinking and beliefs and the mental work around it, because I think that's a big
totally.
piece. Okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, I actually start off with that, and then I have, moments of that interspersed throughout. So I have like, for instance, like handling, special diets and like, things like that, and returning back to like what we need to, like all those challenges. But also at the beginning, I actually try to set up this shift in how we view health, listening to the body. Symptoms are signs that something's going on, reconnecting with ourselves and nature and our families, kind of blowing the lid off of this sort of, I don't know, like this, what we were talking about, this unnatural way of living, and then just seeing it for what it is, and then just actually striving for something that's more demedicalized, I call it, like less, making every sort of thing in your life or health a medical emergency, and more so something you can handle. I want parents to be empowered and say, okay, look, like we have a fever, and this is what we do when we handle fevers, like, or this is what we do when we're pregnant, or having a baby, or, all
Okay.
these
So
things
that
are
example,
natural. Yeah,
that
yeah.
example of what do
Mhm.
you do when you have a fever? I mean, my understanding is the fever is it's a natural mechanism in the body to elevate the
Yep.
temperature that shifts a bunch of things from, building the body to starting to get into kill mode to get rid of whatever's creating a problem. So what do you recommend in your book, or just in general? If I mean, I'm sure a lot of parents here, their kids have had ear infections, they've had fevers.
Yeah.
What would you do?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's the immune system doing its job. So if we suppress the symptom, we suppress the immune system. And so we could, most of us, get better eventually, right? But we could prolong that illness by suppressing a fever. We could actually deplete vitamins and minerals. Like we deplete B vitamins or glutathione, which is a master antioxidant, right? When we use like medications to suppress a fever. And sometimes we don't get fully well from those things. So we have, like things that crop up later, or the immune system's a little bit weaker, like, so we want that to happen. And I mean, it's no fun, but what I talk about in the book is actually supporting the body through that process, right? So we don't want a fever over 105, and that's when we step in with medical, the medical intervention. But before that, if we've got a slight fever, we support the body through that with fluids and with, like making sure that I mean, we're not eating a ton, right? We're resting a lot. We're letting the body kind of do its thing. We do massage, we do things to make your kids more comfortable. We do lots of cuddling, and even things like homeopathy. So for instance, belladonna is a really good homeopathic remedy for fever, like generally speaking. But with homeopathy, you might need to, work with a homeopath, or, like research a little bit as far as which one is most appropriate for your child's symptoms. But generally speaking, belladonna is a really nice one for bringing down fever. And it's safe. It's not a medication. It doesn't disrupt other body systems. It doesn't deplete, any, essential nutrients. And it works with the body rather than against it. So it's less of a battle and more of a support.
And so when you say it brings down the fever, it does that in conjunction with the immune system natural tendency of what it's already trying to do. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
That's great.
Yeah. So those are some of the things that we do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's great. I'm curious if you can share some really like super practical tips of people getting back to nature, getting back to a natural way. And especially I'm thinking of people living in cities who, especially
Yeah.
with the COVID situation, have been very isolated, haven't gotten out a lot. And, just there's so many restrictions. So like what are some things people can do really to get back to this nature way of being?
Yeah. Well, there are lots of them. I mean, the first one is get outside. And then the next one's get outside. And the next one's get outside, right? Like, so, I mean, those things are that's huge, because, right? Like, go outside. Because, I mean, I know we're used to schedules and classes, and like, oh, I can't go to my schedule or my class, or I can't play my hockey anymore, or I can't do my soccer because, we can't get together. And that's really important. I really think that like group, activity is very important. But if you can't do that, and if you have this habit of actually getting outside, you'll be more active, period. Like, so, and you'll be, like connected to nature. And so you'll be more in the ground, in the dirt, and in the whatever, depending where you live. You could be in the garden at this time of year. And if you're in somewhere colder like me, which I'm in Saskatchewan in Canada, there's a little snow still on the ground. It snowed again, but it's been nice. I was outside running. I was outside, but it's a little bit snowy still. But I mean, even in that weather, you bundle up. Like even when my kids were little, I just throw them in snowsuits, and I put them on a sled, and we would go tootle around the neighborhood. And we played at every single park in the city. We actually like kind of played a game. We're like, we haven't been to that park yet. We're going to go over there. We haven't been to that park yet. We're going to go over there. Spend time by the riverbank, even though we were in a city, right? Every city has a park. Every city has sidewalks you can go walk down. So we tend to feel really restricted, and it's really hard to feel like we don't have choice. And how I always feel like we can feel more empowered is to make choices for ourselves, and we create something, or we see what we actually have access to. And so we can choose to do those things, right? So those are easy, going for walks or family runs, or just like getting outside in the morning. That's a really good time to get out for sure, to get that vitamin D in the sun and get your circadian rhythm all, regulated and, working like in the right times of day, right? So get outside, like go do that. Sometimes you go drive out into the country and go hang out somewhere there, right? Like we used to do that all the time. We knew all these back roads and everywhere around our city. Now we're in the country, right? So we can go out and but it gets boring. So like, where are we going to go? Down the road again, down the dirt road. Because it gets a little, but we can hike, like we've got trees and lots of animals around. Like you can hit a lot of places. Like we have the forestry farm, we call it. So it's like the zoo, but it's a little more kind of wild. We used to go there a lot. And when your kids are older, there's still lots of opportunity for that. I mean, the older kids love hiking and they can keep up, right? Or, anything that you can do that gets you outside. And then going out with your family and making it a daily habit, we got to get outside, guys, let's go, and that's, we'll play games outside. You can go red light, green light, or red rover, or whatever. I just used to play that with my 3 kids and me. We didn't need a whole classroom of kids. It was just us, so I highly encourage people to just cultivate this joy in being outside and with nature, and to explore it and to experiment in it and to engage with it. Like buy some nets from the store and go pond dipping, so many ways to connect with nature. And we learn a lot. We identify poop everywhere. We get books from the library and say, what poop is this? Like, what animal is this? And what did it eat? Everything. There's so much to be had out there. So just get outside. That's really what I say. Get outside. Yeah.
Those are some great ideas and sounds like fun. And also, I just want to point out that when we do move our bodies, we create endorphins, which make us feel really good. So it's also really boosting the mood. Yeah. Happy time. I wanted to ask you, so many people, I mean, we're on Zoom right now, but so many people have been on Zoom. They've been on virtual classrooms. They've been on screens, and parents have been like doing everything for their kids. I was just reading somewhere, I was actually just reading that a health practitioner was saying women's periods are off, their shorter cycle periods, and they're spotting between periods. And there was a whole discussion on it, and it's really stress related because they're working, they're doing all the food, maybe they're doing the therapies, maybe they're doing the schooling, and they're doing the discipline. They're just doing everything. And I feel like that's a big burnout. So any thoughts on that? And maybe people can like kind of wave if you're experiencing something like that.
Yeah. I have a unique take on this because I started off doing this a long time ago because I actually homeschool. I actually wouldn't even call it homeschooling. My kids were basically unschooled. So we did we had some a little bit of curriculum, but because I felt like I didn't know math and I couldn't wing it, we had plans but we created our own curriculum. So we were able to do that in our school district or whatever. And we just had to report every year. But that's why we did a lot in nature, and we actually really my kids grew up outside and we had really big groups. So my background actually is English literature. right? So I do have a master's degree in that. So that was my contribution to our community. So I would teach all these kids creative writing, and we would write about all these wonderful things and just let them go with their imaginations. But we had a chemist in our, like one of the families that he was a chemist. And there was one that was, earth sciences and ecology, and we had this group of people that was just like a brilliant group. And it could be considered you go to a school and you have all these people with their different areas of expertise. So, but we were able to create our own schedule and what worked for us. And I highly encourage parents who are transitioning into this, because it can feel really overwhelming. And sometimes it was like January was like the worst month ever, because you're going, did we do anything this year? And have we met all these expectations? And everybody's panicking in January. Like that's the worst, because you're halfway through the year. But then by the end, we looked at all the stuff we did whenever we do that report, and we go, holy cow. Because if you return to this again, we make things harder sometimes by trying to fit something into something that's unnatural. So we're living unnaturally and trying to fit this school idea into our homes. So how are you going to manage that and still have these expectations that you're supposed to meet, or these deadlines, or these things this kid's supposed to do, and you're supposed to do that, and still take care of ourselves? How are we going to do that? But we can't really use the same model everybody else has. Some things work better for some families than others. So for instance, there was this one, there's some homeschooling families that are hyper schooled. There's some families that actually schooled from home, but did what we're probably looking at now is online schooling. And then there were families like us that were a little more child-led, right? We did I'm like, what are you interested in? Let's do a science experiment and make a mess of the kitchen. We did a lot of that. And, but the really schooled ones, there was one kid, he was 15 and he had his pilot's license by then. They would get up at 6, they do their schooling. They were very book learning. They were very they came to my creative writing class, and here I am. I'm the creative writing lady nursing my baby while I'm teaching all these kids. And then there's these kids that come and they're super schooled and very straight, but we all just enjoyed each other and learned from each other. So that family, they were done their schooling by 1, and then they had the rest of the day off. Some families were very loose and but still had goals, but it was they were more natural in the way they reached them, right? So I just say, just give yourselves a bit of a break. Don't feel so. And if there's something that's just unreasonable, I really think it's the parents, I don't know what right is the right word, but there's nothing wrong with coming to the school and saying it's too heavy. We've got to do it this way. How can we work together to make it work, for our family? Because I think that they're your family and that's your life, right? I'm all about sort of taking back that kind of control and deinstitutionalizing things and make them more about your family and how you're going to be happy as a family instead of stressed out every day for what? Mm-hmm. So really taking a step back, looking at what's important, and take this time to spend together, because it's really could be an opportunity for parents. And you could sit with and what did you do in the Zoom class, and stuff like that. It depends how old that those kids are,
or how willing they are to speak to you.
Yeah, pardon?
Or how willing they are to speak, if they're verbal, if they're not verbal, if they're teenagers, there's all.
Totally get that. I had, we had some interesting teen years as well with, 1 or 2 of my kids in different times. And some of that was very difficult. So I'm hearing you. I think that when they were young, we were able to set up this philosophy that they would keep returning to, even though they had difficult times, they would still come back, right? That's what people always say. Parents say that. It's okay, don't panic. But I just want to say too, for another thing about that is self-care and teaching your own self-care, right? But teaching your kids self-care. And then if they are taking care of themselves, they're less likely to have those bad days, disruption in the home and not feeling well, and then thinking that it's all the school that's stressful, but they're better able to manage their own stress, right? Yeah. And then if they're not stressed, you're not stressed, and vice versa. So there's I think meditation's huge, and breath work, and just slowing down.
I wanted to add something about that, because the the people I serve have special needs kids, mostly on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
Some are nonverbal, some are, stimming and doing things. But I really feel that as a parent, first one, you're your child's first teacher. So they're always learning from you, no matter what you do.
Yes.
If you're stressed, they're going to be stressed and they're going to pick up on that. And secondly, if you set the boundary of mom needs some space now, and I'm going to be by myself, and this is what I'm going to do. And you can show them the breath work you're going to do, or you can say, I'm going to meditate, or you can put on a meditation, like an actual sound guided meditation, but to really set your boundaries for this is my time. And if you want to be in your room and do something like, I mean, it really depends on the capability of your child, but I feel like I didn't do that for a long time with my son. And then I did. And it made just a huge difference because I got to have then time for myself and breathing room. So I like those suggestions you gave and the whole idea of self-care. Important.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And whenever parents come to me and they say, oh, my child has autism, ADHD, autoimmune condition, mold illness, whatever it is, pandas, there's always, like, I always address the parents and I say, are you taking care of yourself? What are you doing to take care of yourself? And so, and then they kind of realize nothing. And then it's harder to deal with every day. I mean, you don't want to have to spend your days saying, I have to get through the day. I have to deal with this. It's such a different shift in how you view your whole life and your existence when you get up and you say, okay, like, what's up? Like, just kind of, I know it's easier said than done. I totally do. And people, some people might be listening going, oh, whatever, Carla, that's easier said than done. You weren't at my house this morning, right? You weren't at my house this morning. But it is so much easier to be when you're grounded, right? When you've done some self-care, when you're not starting from an empty tank from the second you get up, right? Because, and then all those things that, I even talked about in the book, there's just those pillars, are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating well? Some people, they'll like change, all these things about the diet, let's say, of someone who is, they're wanting to help them in their health but they don't change their own, right? So, they're the ones that are actually ending up like depleted and not well nourished, so, and also our supports, calling on our supports, right? Do we have any respite? Do we have, time to ourselves just to be, like, is our day full of everything? And sometimes people feel trapped in that. Like, that's all it's like, when am I gonna have time? And then they, it's like, what do you really think how do you think I can do this? There's not two of me, right? But then there's this process of figuring out what needs to stay and what needs to go. What are you doing that you don't need to do, especially if you're doing it for other people? So if your kids are taking care of themselves and they're more empowered and you're not doing everything for them, let them do whatever they can do in the way they do it. Some of us are perfectionists, right? Some of us don't want it done wrong because we have to do it over again. I mean, I'll tell you, I've been doing that a lot. I have done that a lot. But I mean, what can your kids do that they can contribute to without it? So it takes the burden off of you, and it gives them something to do, and feel important, because they are, right? Yeah, everybody has a role there.
And one of the things I think is that they can participate in helping you cook meals. And Katie Kimball of Kids Cook Real Food talks about this, is like, even they can get something out of the refrigerator and put it on the counter, and you can learn, they can learn to chop with knives. And then pretty soon, like, I know a couple of practitioners who their kids are like, they don't ever have to cook anymore because their kids are doing it. So you're like basically teaching the man to fish instead of catching the fish for him all the time, right? You're really, it's super empowering, and it builds a lot of confidence.
Totally. And it's a natural thing. It's not like you're doing this, I'm going to teach my child to cook because it's going to build their confidence. Like, all these things are just like, they just come naturally out of doing that. Again, like that natural thing. Right. We prepare that meal together. We make this that sort of a family habit or tradition. And all that stuff comes out of it and actually it's joyful. It's fun. We put on music, we sing when we make supper. And it's like, I do. And then I run away from like things that I'm cooking, because, my daughters have to like keep track of what it is, because I'll go run away and play the piano because there's a really good song on and I want to play along. Like, we just have fun, right? So I think joy is a huge, huge thing. And I think that when we start losing that joy, you know,
things
it
get
makes
like drudgery.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
There's something I just wanted to go back to, because when my son was young, I also did a little bit of unschooling with him. And what I
Yeah.
learned through that is that, and I did read this book for anyone who has small children, You Are Your Child's First Teacher by Rahima Baldwin. I remember that. She's a Waldorf teacher and a Waldorf teacher trainer. And I just loved that. And it really lit some light bulbs in me that everything I was doing, my child was learning from me, good or bad, bad habits
Right.
too, unfortunately. But when we were unschooling, I would take anyone can do this at any time. You don't have to be an unschooler, but you take your kids to the grocery store and you're buying your broccoli. You're saying, how much does this weigh? Oh, and it's $2.39 a pound. So how much would that cost? Depending on the age, right? And so there's all these things that we naturally do. Well, maybe grocery shopping isn't totally natural. We would actually pick it from our ground, but as you're going about your daily life chores, they're all learning experiences. They're a time to look for patterns. They're a time to do math. They're a time to use some critical reasoning skills. Like if we shift our mindset to think that way, and then add the music like you're saying and have fun. Wow.
Oh, totally. I have the best story about that because yeah, my kids were always with me though, right? Because of that, because they were at home. Like I never got a babysitter to go grocery shopping or, they were always with me. And so whatever I did, they did. And so I was just teach them as I was going, and sometimes I'd slow down and go, actually, this is a teaching moment because I do have to explain something. But most of the time it was just watching what was going on and I'd send them off to do something and someone was responsible to pick up that or this. And I remember running into a friend and she's one of those people, if you ever know, like, I'm sure you have people that like this in your life, Luminara, like where you go click and you just get into like the most deep conversation anytime you run into each other. Okay, so we don't talk about the weather. We're like suddenly like we're like magnets, right? So we kind of went. We're like we shouldn't talk because we are not going to leave. But we went like this in this grocery store, and I look, and she sent her children to go get things, and they were much younger than mine. They were just little guys, like couple twins, and they were maybe 4 or 5. And she said, "You go get this, and you go get that, please." And then, so by the time we were done our conversation, her daughter had this huge bag full of garlic. It was the cutest thing I've ever seen. And her responsibility was to go get the garlic. So she's like, "Oh, honey, we don't need as much. Like, we don't need." So it was just beautiful. Like just how all the kids sort of spread out and they all did their little job in the store. Little job. I shouldn't say that because actually you talk about Waldorf. My kids actually did go to Montessori for a couple of years when they were like really young, like 4 and 5, like preschool age. And that's what we learned there is that they need to, like, we don't say little things or you're just patting people on the back or pretending. No, they don't pretend. They actually do it. They make you tea. They don't pretend it. They make you tea. They make you something to eat. They are actually doing things that matter. And that's a huge shift in thinking too. I remember going into that school and I was floored because I sat in this little tiny chair because it was all set up for their size, right? Children's size. And this little girl, 4 years old, came up to me and said, "Would you like some tea?" And I said, "Sure." And I'm thinking, oh, isn't she cute? And like patronizing, right? And she made me tea. She boiled the water. And that's when I went, I get it. I get it. What this is all about, empowerment, like having a purpose in the world, not because we pretend that you have a purpose, but because you do, right?
That's amazing. Yeah. From the get-go. So I want to, the people who are on, I would love to invite you to type in the chat. Most people know how to use Zoom, but to type in the chat, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, click on chat, and then you can type in questions. So if you have any questions for Carla, if you have any issues that are up for your family. And then the one thing that I'm super interested in, and maybe this would help other people, I'm hoping, is that you said your daughter had type 1 diabetes and you went through the functional medicine route. And I know, I think she got off medication. And so before you answer that, So that's what I want to ask you about, because I think with that people could find utility in that. Tammy just asked ideas for self-care first. Let's do that first.
I do. Okay. I love meditation, but that's a huge topic, because it could be anything from 10 minutes of just belly breathing and focusing on that to like an hour a day. And that's, I mean, the hour a day I think is unrealistic for most parents. And there's so many different ways of looking at meditation. It's like, you know, the secular science-y kind of stuff like Joe Dispenza does. He talks about brain waves and like, you know, like alpha, beta, theta, all those different brain waves, and how, you know, just being in that meditative state will affect that. But all the way to things like, you know, that kind of like yogic, you know, or like different, you know, Buddhism, whatever. So whatever, or even
Christian based.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, so whatever you're comfortable with, there's an entry point for anybody. And there's also a duration, right? Like I said, you go anywhere from 5-10 minutes a day to an hour or 2 hours, or, you know, like crazy amounts of time. But really the point of the meditation is actually to be in the here and now, not in the future, not in the past. And that's super stress reducing. Like that is massive, right? So I think that that's one thing, taking care of your mental and emotional state, regulating your emotions, right? So I think that that's a really huge category. So I think, you know, breath work, like, and I don't mean you don't have to do like really complex breath work. You can, like I said, do belly breathing. You can do breathe in, like, you know, the transformer breath. No, that's not transformer. It's the, I forget what it's called now. Anyway, you breathe in for 5 seconds and breathe out for 5 seconds, in for 5 seconds. So it's more of a controlled breath, but it's, the whole point is bring yourself back to your body, out of fight or flight, out of anything outside of you, right? So I think meditation is beautiful. There's so many more benefits. I could just go on for an hour, but I'll just leave it that one at that. It's one of my favorites.
Can I offer one thing on that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
And this is something I found amazing. There's an app for your phone called Insight Timer. And I got it at first because it had the nice Tibetan bell sounds, but there are tons and tons of free guided meditations. There's bedtime stories for kids. There's kids meditations. There's like the secular and the religious, and there's new age. There's all kinds of things, and it's totally free. So anyway, that's one.
What's it called?
Insight Timer.
Right. Okay, because people talk about Calm, and I kind of like, I looked at that, but I didn't end up getting it. So I have a lot of, like, I have my favorites, right? So we end up having our favorites. Okay, that's awesome. I'm gonna actually suggest that to my clients. Thank you. Okay, so great. That's a great one, right? And then also, okay, so that whole mental emotional piece, self-regulation, right? Like being able to, because it is self-care, but it's also, it carries into the rest of your life, so that self-care sort of carries on even though you're busy doing other things, because you're more centered and grounded. So just taking a bit of time to yourself, you know, just whether it's in meditation or just contemplation, reading a book, right? Having some tea, just slowing down. And so I think those things are really important. I think that massage, okay, come on. I actually asked for my massage therapist for Christmas. I'm like, can you just get me Paul for Christmas? Because I just want that massage all day, every day. Like literally, it makes you feel loved, cared for, touch. Like I actually have a quote in the book where I said something, no, it wasn't in my book. It was one of the poems I wrote for my daughter. And part of it was like, children, it was something, this is going to sound really hard, like heavy, but children die when they're not touched. And so do mothers, right? And that's the truth. It's the truth. And we don't get enough of our own self-care, but also sometimes outside of ourselves, because we're too busy, you know, doing things, and other people don't really see our need, and we don't always ask. So, I mean, if we don't have that in our home life, you know, because a lot of parents have a lot of strife between them too when they're dealing with a lot of really big health issues, and there's, you know, it's really tough. So if you can't be, I mean, be there for each other is one thing, but if you can't be, if you don't have those supports, things like where you go and you just go to appointment and massage therapist, like you get that you fulfill that need for touch, you know? And of course, you know, there's the muscles that they release and all that tension, and they make you pay attention to your body. And I think all these things are really about paying attention to your body, like yoga, you know, and even working out. Like I hired a personal trainer recently. because I wanted him to push me. Because I'm a yoga teacher too. Okay, so but so I do the yoga thing, but I wanted to lift some weights because I was like, I got like not very strong arms, like I feel like, even though I do all this yoga. So, but even that kind of like activity that seems like a little more aggressive, like, you know, we think of self-care as like taking it down a notch, which sometimes it is. But sometimes it's just like kicking it up. It's going for a run. It's doing something aggressive. It's like, you know, joining a soccer team, right? You know, like I love aggressive sports. I used to play rugby, right? I love it. And then now I grunt whenever I catch a ball or, you know, it's like that habit, you know, you're like, oh, you know, so like things like that are still self-care, you know, taking care of your body and making sure you eat. Okay. So we don't just serve everybody and then like, you're still cleaning up or you're doing this and, you know, we eat with our family. Like it's even little babies, right? When people say like they feed their babies and then they're, you know, okay, they're good. They're in their high chair. Yay, I can go do vacuum, right? No, sit down and eat with your baby, you know, like, so that thing, sleep is huge for self-care. Okay, so it's like, and again, some of your parents are not going to be sleeping very well. So that can be a challenge. I talk about sleep like quite a bit in the book too, and how important that is. But it's huge. It's when you detoxify your brain, right? It's when you produce melatonin. You know, it's a very important time, and you get one sleepless night. You know, it's not good. So depends what you're doing. If you're like watching TV before bed and you think that's your downtime, cut that out because sleep is your downtime or sleep is preparing for the next day. So if that's what you're doing, or if you're checking social media, you know, just check what you're doing before bed and see if you can make that.
Why is
bedtime a
that?
little bit
Tell them why
better.
it's not great to look at the
Because
screen before bed.
no, well, there's lots, but there's like, okay, so first is necessity, right? You say, I don't have time to sleep. I only get 5 hours or 6 hours a night. Well, why? Like, are you really that busy before bed? Or is it, you know, or are you having issues, like your child has issues sleeping, then you work on that. But if it's something you don't really need to be doing, you know, you can kind of cut that out or do something else, like maybe read that makes you a little more sleepier. And okay, you want me to address that electronics? Yeah, well, it disrupts.
Yeah, because someone
rhythm.
asked about also weaning kids off electronics and TV. So just the before the bed and then on the kids.
Okay, let's do that then. Let's move on to that one. Okay, so yeah, okay, so it disrupts the circadian rhythm, right? So anything that's stressful will actually raise your, you know, cortisol. It'll stress your adrenals, right? Like, so your nervous system's kind of keyed up at the same time as well. So we don't want that happening before bed. And blue lights actually indicate that it's time to be awake. You know, like the sun's up and all that, and it's not. Like, so this is sort of what we call like light pollution, actually, where, you know, we're having this, you know, enter our system, this light, and when it's not supposed to. So in the evening, we're supposed to actually, traditionally, and we're talking, go back to nature, and it needs to be amber light, because the amber light indicates time to slow down, time to start resting, time to repair, right? Because that's what we need that sleep time for, is rest and repair and being able to recharge and detoxify from the day before. So, so this is what it's doing, is disrupting that. So what happens is we have all kinds of downstream effects, from hormonal to neurochemicals. So then inability to detox. So if you have blue lights at night and you're stimulating your nervous system, and you're also disrupting all those hormones. So you have this cascade that's happening through the night. So you'll have sleep disturbance. You'll maybe wake up in the middle of the night. You might not have a restful sleep because you don't have the right neurochemicals being produced, or antioxidant, you know, they detoxifying melatonin, right? And so you'll have sleep disturbance and not restful sleep. So the next day you're trashed. You're totally trashed, and you can actually, those effects aren't just overnight. They'll have residual effects through the day, right? So if your hormones are disrupted, you know, your cortisol, you know, is disrupted. Like, you don't have enough chutzpah to get up in the morning, so it's low. It's too low to get you up, or it's too high for you to actually fall asleep. So if you have trouble falling asleep and you say, well, I can't fall asleep, so I just check my social media or whatever, or I check in on my kids' schoolwork or whatever it is, you know, you could be doing something very relevant, but might not be the right time of day to be doing that.
Right.
And
I just wanted to add Can I add a piece?
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
like you mentioned, looking at your kids' schoolwork, I just think the content of what you're actually looking at can be disruptive
Uh-huh.
as well. Not just the chemistries that you mentioned, but like
Yes.
if you're watching something violent or you're even listening to the news, I think that can be bad for sleep. But I wanted to turn to
Bad
kids.
anyway, sometimes. It's bad for your mental health to watch the news, period. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Oh, I just wanted to turn to the kids and strategies for getting them off the screens and TV. And then we have another question after that.
Yeah. Okay, so strategies, yeah, see, it's tough. I mean, one is to lead by example, right? Another thing, you can set family rules depending on how, well, I think at any age, you have to just sort of see how old they are and what they need to be doing online. Some of the older kids are going to have to be doing more. So maybe adjusting the time of day that's happening. I know it's a challenge. I mean, everybody's going to be different, but the younger kids probably don't need as much time online. They should be outside more or doing whatever else. So setting boundaries, family house rules, like we're all going to adhere to this because we just want to all feel good and be healthy and be harmonious. And so, not making a huge deal out of it, like, take it away and, make it a big power struggle. That's like, oh man, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster because we want to, and like, tell me about it. I mean, I've seen kids that have been like addicted, like lots, like to electronics. I've seen actually like blood-brain barrier breach because of the wireless. That's another actually issue. It's not just the act itself and the hormonal disruption, but it's also the EMF exposure, which is highly damaging and inflammatory. And so particularly for the brain, especially if you're wearing like wireless headsets, I see lots of kids with sensory issues and autism and ADHD and stuff like that, who, it's like these iPads and stuff like that are supposed to be good for you and beneficial for learning and for, all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, do we really want to be creating another problem? So how are we going, so there really needs to be some boundaries set and noticing how your child behaves after they use those things, or, like right after they use them, or maybe like just, like a few hours later or something like that, or how they react if you were to take them away. Like say, okay, well, we aren't going to do that. Are they, having a panic attack? Are they like, so is this a crutch or is it a tool? Right? So this is what we're always trying to discern. Is it a crutch or is it a tool? Or is it like a source of addictive behavior, or is it actually part of the problem? So I know that might be a little controversial, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to be out with it because I've seen that, and I've seen actually really very scary, functional medicine, results for like antibodies to brain tissue. And it's always those kids that have a lot of like high exposure to EMF, whether it be wireless, internet or Bluetooth technology, especially when it's on their head or using cell phones, holding them, or all that stuff. So reducing, right? Reduce the duration and getting further away from these devices too. That's how you can deal with the EMF issue. But with the habitual issue, there's other stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna let you ask your question. Sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I had a client the other day who would give her son a different option. So after his therapy, they said, you can have 3 minutes of video or something. She's like, well, why don't we go ride bikes? And he was like, yeah, so like really to get them into some other task that they really love. I think that just came up because I talked to her the other day.
I love that, because Luminara, okay, so this is the thing about self-care, because you would not have the energy to say, let's go ride bikes and be excited about it. You'd be like, oh man, my kid, you wouldn't want to actually even suggest that because you don't have any fuel in the tank, right? So if you do, and you're taking care of yourself and you're more, you feel better, you're more inclined to suggest things that are more healthy for your kids too. Because like, let's face it, if you have no sleep and you feel like you're working all the time and you feel like, you just like you're tanked out, that is the last thing you're going to want to do is go ride a bike. Like it's going to be way easier to just like go, oh, thank goodness they're busy. And sometimes that feels like I felt like that a million times throughout my parenting journey. Millions. And I go, please just go watch TV. Like, just leave me alone, is what's on Disney Channel, like, right? So I get it. But if your tank is full, right, there's more, you got more chutzpah to actually make those suggestions, and then your kids follow suit. They do. And they actually want that. Most of them do. I mean, there's some that are, struggling in certain ways, but most of them want to be doing something else.
And
they
be in
wanna
connection, with you while they're doing it.
Yeah.
I wanted to go on to the question from Cheryl. She said, my autistic grandson has always struggled with rage, and a year of being stuck in the house with getting no for an answer to most of his requests for safety reasons hasn't helped. He's 10. Explanations of the reasons mean nothing to him, so he's not able to deal with that. And he has the typical rigid thinking characteristic that of autistic kids that makes him dismiss any and all suggestions for things he can do. Any suggestions?
Okay, thanks a lot for that one. No, just kidding. I'm teasing Cheryl. Okay, so all right, so rage. So yeah, frustration. All right, so where does he hold any power? Maybe that's where, because I think that when we're in rage, I mean, there's other things, that there's biochemical stuff, obviously. There's all the stuff that Luminara, you probably talk about all these things about toxicity and high glutamate and like low GABA, like causing these rage things. And I mean, sometimes there's like other stuff going on, in the functional medicine piece. So that would take a bit of investigation. But as far as like being frustrated, like raging because he's frustrated, I always look at like, how do we empower people, our kids, ourselves, because that's where it comes from. The frustration is not having a choice, not having an outlet for something that you need. So what else could be, I mean, okay, so there's no, but what can you say yes to, right? So if he said no, and you don't need to even have explanation. It's like, well, we can't do that right now, but how about this, or this? What do you think what would you like to do for like that instead? And, when you talk about things like safety reason, I'm not sure what that might be. Like if there's something like, I don't know, like something social that you wanted to go to, I'm not sure. I mean,
I can imagine. Yeah, Cheryl, if you want to type it in, but I could also imagine it's like, no, you can't go out in the yard because he might run away, for example.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's not just.
I'm making that up. I don't know, Cheryl, if that's true, but.
Okay. Right. So, but then I guess, I mean, like, I don't know if that's an example. I mean, you just be out there with that child, like, and then, like somehow be able to allow some freedom and some choice, because that's so frustrating. I don't care who you are. If you're a child, I mean, actually it'd be more frustrating if you're a child or a teenager and you have no choice. Like, I mean, at least we own our house, we buy the groceries, we make the rules, and so I think that if the more choice, the better. I don't know. I mean, it depends. I mean, because she says he's pretty rigid, right? So it might be he might be fixating on one specific thing, and that's the only thing that's gonna do. But there might be a way to do that. There might be alternatives, that's something else that that would be just as satisfactory and meet that very need that he needs. So it's like about listening, about that need, and really it's hard, but being able to unpack what that child needs without reacting in the moment, and then you can respond to it, right?
Okay, Cheryl wrote something. She said he wants to come to my house, but he is not allowed to until 2 weeks after my second vaccine, which will be mid-April, or he wants to leave the house and do anything, especially shopping for toys. And it sounds like there's this aura of fear-based, we can't go out because he might get something. So I just wanted to say too, while you were speaking, it reminded me of something I did when my son was really small. The mother's a paramedic. That makes a lot of sense, Cheryl. So Cheryl, this might be helpful for you or his mom. But one of the things I did with my son is I went to these workshops led by someone named Patty Whipfler in the Bay Area, and she would have kids rule. So we would get together, and it was parents and kids, and the kids would take the pillows and get to throw them at the parents, like in playful way, not in a harmful, I'm going to get you way. But the kids got to be in charge. And so, and then I would do that maybe 30 minutes a day. And we called it special time. And my son was in charge for 30 minutes. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent around the train table when he was 2 years old. That was so boring to me, but it was his time and he got to call the shots. So it's not like leaving the house, but it's something around the house that he's in charge of for, maybe you just start with 10 minutes or 15 minutes and do special time and say, okay, you lead the way. And it's just one idea
Mm-hmm.
for that empowerment
I like that.
you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. I like that.
So yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts on that, Carla?
Well, not really. Like, I mean,
I love where you were going with that.
Yeah, and I think that that's pretty much what I would say. You know, finding ways to empower and finding what that need is. What does he need that that this one activity is going to, meet that need, right? So maybe it is getting out of the house. Maybe it is being with grandma or being at your house or something. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, if it's only I just think just work with what you've got and some things that actually are just as beneficial or that he gets joy from just as much, and just filling that cup up a little bit more with those things.
That's not poor eating and crappy snacks because a lot of kids want to have that stuff and treats, right?
Yeah. I totally agree with that, because then you're just setting yourself up for more rages and then frustration and disaster, because their biochemistry is all up upend. Yeah.
And I like what you said about his biochemistry, because there might actually, I mean, I can almost guarantee you there's some underlying functional medicine type cause going on. And I'm just thinking, I mean, I love what Carla said about what's his need underneath that, because we are emotional beings as well. But then the biochemistry is maybe GABA would help, maybe 5-HTP, maybe some of those more calming neurotransmitters. But magnesium, right? But you'd need to really work with a practitioner, because I don't know the state of his inside. You really need to be a little bit of a detective on that. And I know you're the grandma, but there needs to be some more investigation.
For sure.
I just wanted to ask if there's any more questions. You're welcome, Cheryl. If there's any more questions, to type them in now, because we're about to wrap up. Wondering if you can, while we wait to see if any more questions come in, wondering if you can leave with maybe one of your best tips or something we haven't covered already.
Okay. Just wait. Okay. I'm going to look and see if there's anything that I was looking. No. Really, like, I mean, I guess I could sum it up a little bit, and I think that just to cut, like a takeaway for sure from this, when we talked about, is taking care of yourself, right? And teaching children to take care of themselves, and having this sense of like empowerment, right? Because these choices that you have choice, like you have, and I think that we have a lot more information that we give ourselves credit for. Mm-hmm. And so when we stop, and what we're doing with our fast pace is that we don't see it as much as if we slow down and stop. So when we're caring for ourselves, when we're paying attention to symptoms, when we're trying to find out what causes things in the first place, and then living more naturally, we have a much better chance of feeling empowered, and not, like Cheryl's little grandson, less frustrated about our state, and more empowered to actually do something about it, right? So I actually do, like, I talk about like raising your family's vibration in the home, and all stuff like that, because I think that that's really important too. And I have that as part. It's actually a freebie when you buy the book, but and it's really important to pay attention to that. Like, what are we cultivating within our home, and do we have this sense of joy every day? And if we don't, why not? What is it that we can look at, and not as a pressure thing at all. It's just like an awareness. And once you're aware, that seed is planted to do something better, to water it, to make sure that soil is nice and nourishing, right? Mm-hmm. I kind of tend to think in metaphor.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that.
That's how my brain goes. But yeah, and there was one more question. I see this from Stephanie. Mm-hmm. Tips for anxiety. Okay, that's a huge one too. We kind of mentioned a few of them, right? So working with a practitioner, right? Like, to actually fine tune what specific supplements, if we're talking supplementation, if you're talking general lifestyle things, it's honestly everything we mentioned. If that child's anxious, make sure they're not on those like electronics, like 24 hours a day. Like I've actually even led like groups of parents in screen fasts, where they actually get right off and see how the behavior changes when they're off of screens entirely. And often there's like such a huge shift in like everything, like things you wouldn't even think, right? That would be that would change. So yeah, I would definitely be looking at that, the exposure to EMF, as well as just being on those screens.
Well, as
And
well as
also,
the turning, I just wanted to add with that, turning off the Wi-Fi at night, or only having it
at
on
least,
a time of
yeah,
day.
at least that. Yeah, that should never be on at night. That should, like, that's not even doing any good. So yeah, for sure. Because when your brain is trying to really reduce all those toxins in the brain through the lymphatic system, and and actually, all these, like the Wi-Fi, the wireless is actually brain inflammatory. Like, it's inflammatory, right? Not just the brain, but the whole body. But anyway, and I'll just say a couple more things. I know you got to get off. So GABA, magnesium is really nice, and all the minerals, right? And because it's a loop, right? Like, low magnesium will cause, like, where you don't feel so calm, but then it's like also when you're stressed, you actually pee out all your minerals, right? So you end up more deficient. So magnesium is another nice one. Essential oils, if you can tolerate, so things like lavender, those really calming essential oils. And actually the happy ones are the citruses. So if you want to feel a little bit like, more joyful, you use things like orange and lime, and those other citrus, like grapefruit even. So yeah, those are kind of like a few, but getting good sleep, turn off those blue lights before bed for sure, and reduce screen time during the day. And mindfulness based, things, right? Like, so mindfulness, calming, taking mental health days, right? And good food, bad mood foods, good mood foods. There's such a thing. And there's anything bags, boxes, cans, are reading that label, right? So try to make fresh food, getting away from things that are highly processed and high sugar. Sugar is terrible for anxiety. You'll have a crash, and then those kids are just not doing so well. And then you have the high, they're like, some are even uncontrollable. So the basics, right? So those things will be really useful.
I want to add one thing, and this goes back to when we talked about meditation, is that even if you don't think your child's going to meditate, that's totally fine, right? But if you set the tone where you say, I'm going to take quiet time, most times our child will follow what we do, or our child's energy will follow our energy. So I feel like setting the example and setting a boundary and saying, this is quiet time. I mean, come on, they do that at every single daycare or childcare, right? Like, they always have quiet time. You don't have to take a nap, but you have to have downtime. Right. So just maybe setting that routine for your day, and see if that makes a difference. And they may not settle down, but you know what? If you do and you're able to, you're at least starting to set a habit and continue with it. That's what I would say. Just coming strongly through me to say that.
I know, and you just started me on something else, just like really quick. So I know I'm not quick with anything really, but okay, so I'm quick, but I take long because I have lots to say. But okay, so like a bedtime routine too. I mean, there could be anxiety all throughout the day. So really setting like reasonable goals during the day, like not over scheduling, like too much expectation for what you're supposed to get done, right? That's just, and the fast pace is really highly anxiety producing for children. They feed off that, like you said. They'll pick up on ours. And then also the bedtime routine. This was like my favorite time of day after the witching hour. Okay. Once they get in, they're dirty, they're outside and whatever. And then you got to do baths and all that. That was the witching hour. Okay. When everybody's hungry, like, that's like, oh, okay, let's just, get through this part. After that, all squeaky clean in their jammies. Right. We would have a really nice time of reading books together. And we would read and probably stayed up too late some days, but we would read, and we'd have a stack from the library every week. We'd go to the library and just have this pile of books, and we read every night. So the bath time was a time for them just to be and play. And then they would, color on the walls with their little crayons. And when they got older, it was just shower time, whatever. But we still read when they were older. I would read them chapter books, or we would connect on something else. They'd read something to me. And that was a really nice routine. Or even Epsom salt baths, or putting lavender in the bath, lavender foot rubs. We'd rub each other's feet, right? And that was a really nice thing. And then after they got older and they're like, I don't like feet. I'm like, what do you mean? I want a foot rub, whiny. But those are really nice. Those sort of like a thing that they look forward to, and it actually calms them down, even just thinking about doing it, looking forward to doing that, right?
That's
So
nice. That's such a
yeah,
great
yeah.
suggestion. Wait, Carla, before we part, I want you to tell people the name of your book and how they can find it and find you.
Okay. I'm just like replying to Cheryl. Okay, I'm just saying, okay. All right, so book. Okay, so I think you have a link. So to the book. Do you have a link to the book you can plunk in there?
I'll put it in the email when I send out the recording.
Okay, can we put it under this talk or anything?
Oh God, I don't have it up. Sorry.
No, it's okay. But like after, will they have that?
Yeah,
Because
but
they can go.
once I stop the Zoom, they won't get the link. So
Yeah, but like on the recording on your Facebook page or something. I can
yes.
plunk it in there. If they go to like, you want me to plunk it in?
Yeah,
So
plunk it in the chat.
Okay. And if they go to Healthy Family Formula, and then you can find a link to the book anyway. So it's healthyfamilyformula.com.
Okay.
And here's the direct link to the book itself. So it's like, it's got a longer URL, right? Healthyfamilyformula.com, Family Health Revolution, the book, but there are hyphens in between, right? So it's a little longer. Okay. So scoop that up if you want that. I can even comment under there and just say, here's the link, on your Facebook page too, as a
oh, right. Okay.
Or something like that.
I'm going to put that in the Facebook page right now.
Okay. Thanks
for that.
So they can go there and find the book, and then just information about it and what's in it and that kind of thing. And that's it. So what else did you ask me? Where to find the book? That's it.
And what you just said, healthyfamilyformula.com. Like if you want to say anything about if people want to learn from you. Right.
Yeah. So it's healthyfamilyformula.com. And that's where, we're redoing the website. It's super ugly. And I've been, some nice parts.
Way to be honest.
I was actually, I'm, because when you have lots to do and then you're like, you don't want to wait for someone else to do it. So I update some things myself and I'm not a designer. So it's fine. It serves its purpose. It has a link where you can find a whole bunch of previous interviews I've done and like all kinds of subjects. And I've done a Children's Health Summit 4 times. So you were part of that. So they can access those Children's Health Summits with like so many interviews there. And they can see my background and find my services too, like for group and individual coaching, as well as my family health coach and consultant training program. So I train people how to do the work that I do as well. So they can find all that there. There's just a little navigating to do, but it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward on the book. And they can book a meet and greet with me from the web page too, from the website. If they ever want to learn a little bit more about how we might intersect, they can book a little 15-minute free meet and greet there too. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your being here and talking about these strategies and getting back to nature. And just I couldn't be in more agreement with you on just about everything. And I learn from you every time I talk to you. Aw, thank you. Thank you so much. We need more joy, Yeah, for sure. Life is good. And yeah. All right. Thank you for bringing your joy. All right. My pleasure.